So I got to make a choice between sowing seeds or just buying my plants from the local nursery. I heard growing plants from your own seeds really gives you a head start. How do I go about doing that? Hey guys, welcome back to Louisiana Simple Living. It's Daryl. We're right here in the garden today. I know a lot of you are interested in starting your own garden and you have some of those same questions. This video, which will answer some of those questions, is part of my Spring Garden 101 series and supports my goal of getting 1,000 of you viewers to get started with your first backyard organic raised bed garden. Now go ahead, subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll see all the upcoming content in the series. First, let's cover a few terms that we need to understand before we get into actually sowing seeds. Alright, sowing seeds, what does that mean? Alright, sowing seeds is nothing more than taking a seed, placing it in soil or around the top of soil at a prescribed depth with the intent of getting it to germinate. Alright, germination. Now the process of sowing seeds does not guarantee that seed is going to germinate, which means it's going to sprout up from the seed. Okay, to germinate seeds you need a combination of a couple different things. Number one is moisture. You know, the seed has to be moist, it has to have enough water but not too much. The other element is temperature. Alright, so the temperature, if you take like tomatoes, the optimal conditions for it to germinate is between 65 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, a pepper like 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So that means indoors during the colder months, it's just right for germination. The third element that it needs is oxygen. That's why you want to have a good seed starting mix, which will allow oxygen down into the soil, down to the seed. Each seed has enough stored energy that once it germinates, it sprouts and can reach up to the top of the soil. And of course at that point, it's a different game. You'll need light. And there are some exceptions like lettuce. Lettuce does require light, but most seeds do not require light to germinate. All right, so germination is complete once the sprout reaches the top of the soil. And then most seeds we're going to work with take about 2 to 3 days up to 2 weeks or so. There's a lot of factors that are involved with how fast it will germinate. But, all right, direct sow. So direct sow means we're going to take the seed and plant it directly into the garden where you want it to grow. So it'll germinate in place and grow in that location that you put the seed. Some plants like cucumber, squash, beans, they don't do well transplanting. So their root system just does better if you go ahead and direct sow them into the garden. So you do have a choice as a gardener whether you want to sow your own seeds, especially again tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, things of that nature. You can sow those seeds indoors, or you can just wait till after the last freeze, go to your local nursery and pick up those plants. Yeah, and I personally sow seeds for all of my plants, the only exceptions being things like strawberries, potatoes, sweet potatoes, things like that. All right, now that we covered the terms, now we can talk a bit more specifically about sowing seeds and sowing seeds inside. So it's no secret that some of the plants that we want to put out in our spring garden don't do well in the cold. They won't germinate, so you don't want to direct sow them out in the garden. You want to go ahead and sow the seeds inside. And the time to maturity from the point that it germinates to the time that you can harvest the produce, it takes anywhere from 60, 90 days depending upon what kind of vegetable you're talking about. We can take advantage of the environment inside to go ahead and start our plants, so when we do put them out after the last freeze, they got a jump start and we'll be able to get to harvest them much quicker. Alright, so let's talk about the benefits of sowing your seeds inside. You get to extend the season. You basically are going to give your plants a head start, 6 to 8 weeks of a head start, to get to start being able to harvest. And that's critical, especially in your more northern climates where your spring summer season does not last near as long as it does say here in zone 9A. All right, plant varieties. By sowing seeds inside, you're able to get a much broader variety of your plants versus if you go and buy plants from your local nursery. And they may have say 10 different types or more of tomatoes, and that may be good enough, but I like to experiment. I like to plant varieties that I haven't ever planted before. And if you can go on either through buying seeds or you can go online and take a look at some of those sites, man, they got all kind of a variety from all over the place, every type of vegetable you can think of. And to me, that's part of the fun of gardening, is trying some new plants, new varieties of plants. Another key benefit is you're able to control the environment Consistent temperature and moisture are critical to the germination and then the growth of your seedlings. And you can control that much better from extremes. You can control that much better inside. One of the other benefits of sowing your seeds inside is you ensure that the plants that you're going to have out in your garden, you're able to stay organic. If you purchase plants from a local nursery, you just don't really know for sure. But man, if you get the seeds and you grow it yourself, you know there's no pesticides, you know there's no heavy fertilizer, commercial fertilizers, things of that nature that's ever going to be on your plant. You have complete control of keeping it organic. All right, another benefit, you can save money. You know, if you go to a local nursery, let's say you buy a little 6-pack of pepper plants. I mean, that may cost you $3 or $4. They're not a real big plant, but they'll be good. You'll be able to plant out in your garden. If you get one that's a little bit bigger, man, that can be up to $10, $12 a piece for each pepper or tomato plant, if they're pretty big sized. Whereas you can go and buy seed packets anywhere from $3 to $5, $6, and you may have 20 to 100 different seeds in that seed packet, depending upon the size or the variety of the seed. So let's take a pepper seed. Say you got 20, or tomato, you got 20 seeds in a pack. You can go ahead and sow those seeds, and end up with 20 different plants, versus at the cost of $3 to $4, $5, let's say. Or you could go to your nursery and spend an enormous amount more to go ahead and get the plants with less variety, and not knowing if they're organic for sure. But on the flip side, if you're not careful, well, you can spend a ton of money on seeds, trust me. Okay, one of the other benefits of sowing seeds inside versus direct sow, you're able to make sure that you have enough plants, or the number of plants that you wanted to have in your raised bed garden. Whereas if you direct sow with the germination rates, they may or may not all come up, especially if it's outside and it's not ideal conditions like you would have inside. So it's just another way to make sure you have the plants that you need. You can plant more seeds than you need inside to make sure you have enough plants when it's time to plant them outside. All right, one of the other benefits is the increased survival rate. Being that it is ideal conditions inside the house, or inside, indoors, you have a much better chance of having more robust, healthy seedlings. So using transplants from sowing seeds inside gives you a much better survivability rate of your plants. The bigger and more healthier transplants are, the bigger chance we have of competing with weeds that may be in your raised bed. Now hopefully, if we're careful with the way we've amended our soil, or initially started off our soil mix within our raised bed, that we don't have too many weeds. And finally, one of the benefits of sowing seeds indoors is it's just fun. I really enjoy working in the garden, getting ready for my spring garden. Now I have a fall garden that I'm having to maintain right now as well. But for a lot of people, if you don't have a fall winter garden, or maybe it's too cold in your particular region, this does give you a chance to get started with your spring garden 6 to 8 weeks before you're ready to plant. So it allows you to have fun even when it's freezing cold outside. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about the ins and outs and things you got to know when you're getting ready to sow seeds indoors. I use seed starting trays that I've ordered off of Amazon. I have used like the Jiffy growing kits, things like that in the past. The process I'm following now is just kind of something I've learned over the time. But like I said, I do order the seed starting trays online, like off of Amazon. They're cheap. Thing is, and you can use a cut off milk jug. You could use a Cool Whip little plastic container. You could use an egg carton, right? But you just want to make sure you got holes in it so it will drain. And the other key thing is just to make sure that they're clean. A little soapy water to clean it out, especially if you use it, in the past when you were sowing seeds. All right, seed starting mix is different than potting mix or the growing mix. And again, the seed starting mix is made with a little bit finer materials to help enable the roots to grow better. I mean, I typically just purchase a premium seed starter mix, either online or from my local nursery. I actually use a soil block tool, and what you do is you actually get that soil block tool and you fill it with your seed starting mix that's moist, and it basically creates a block. I'll put those in my seed starting trays, and that's what I actually use to plant my seed and germinate my seed. Now you can use some of the they're kind of like the compressed soil blocks, that you have to put water on, they expand. I've used those kind of kits in the past. I've never had that much success with them, and I just prefer using a soil block tool and making them myself. I think it's a much better method to use. Alright, when we talk about germination, one thing we didn't mention was germination rate. So what that means is for each, what percentage of the seeds that you plant will actually germinate. Now your germination rate is basically just a percentage of how many seeds that you plant actually germinate. And there's a lot of different conditions. That's why we want to plant those seeds or germinate those seeds inside, because we can kind of control those things about temperature, moisture, and so forth. But from my perspective, I usually plant, if it's bigger seeds like a pepper, a tomato, those kind of things, I'll plant probably 2 per soil block. For smaller seeds, I'll put 4 or 5 different little seeds in there, because I just want to make sure I'm going to get the number of plants that I want, and that I will get at least 1 or 2 of them to germinate. Your tomatoes, typically there's not a big problem with them unless they're older seeds, but I just don't like to take the chance. So I usually go ahead and overseed the soil blocks to be able to get them, to make sure I got enough plants that I want. Now if you end up with a couple of plants that are growing from that one soil block, it's real easy just to thin them out. All you do is take a little small pair of scissors and just clip off the ones that you don't need. And I'll usually wait a couple weeks to kind of look and see which plant's growing better than the others. Then I'll clip the extra ones out. One thing you got to do is when your seed starting tray is make sure you label what seeds you put in that particular spot. It's very easy to kind of get ahead of yourself, and then you'll never know unless you label it what kind of plant or what kind of seed you planted. Just make sure you keep up with it as you're sowing your seeds. Just make sure you label each one, or at least the whole row if it's a whole row of the same thing. Alright, you got to make sure you also understand your seed planting depth. My soil block tool creates a little dimple on the top of it, but if you look on the back of the seed, on the seed pack, it'll tell you whether it needs to be 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch, how deep you need to sow that particular seed for that seed type or that vegetable type, and so you want to make sure you follow that. So for most plants you don't need light to actually germinate, but once that thing comes up and breaks the soil, it does need light. So you need to either do one of 2 things. You need to either put it by a window, so it's going to get lots of sunlight, or you can put a grow light up, which is what I do, and I'll let my grow light stay on 14 hours a day. I have it on a timer, and just every day it comes on and goes off, lets them sleep at night, so to speak. But that has worked really well for me over the last number of years, and I'll keep doing that going forward. Alright, watering. You want to make sure, whatever watering method you use, you don't want a big stream of water coming out, and it'll knock that seed out, at least initially. I use, I've used in the past, like a water bottle, and in the plastic cap just poked holes in it so I can just kind of drizzle water out. You can use a spray bottle, which is what I often do as well. Those all work pretty well. Another thing to consider is whether you're going to put a wicking mat down at the very bottom. And all it does is just kind of help ensure what water you have down in the bottom of the tray. It wicks, it spreads all throughout the bottom of the tray. So if you forget to water one day, or whatever the case may be, it just helps spread that water out and makes it accessible to all the roots of all the plants in that tray. Now once you put the seeds in the dimple that my soil block puts in there, or maybe use your finger or a pencil or whatever to make little holes for our seeds, you want to make sure you cover them up adequately. If your seed starter mix has a lot of bigger pieces in it, bigger pieces, little pieces of wood or whatever the case may be, you don't want that to block the seed, and it from the seed germinating and sprout, would try to come up, and then you got this piece of wood over it. It ain't going to come up probably. So what you can do, again, if your soil mix is pretty large, has large pieces, you can get a strainer and just kind of shake it out, shake that soil mix through it, that seed starter mix through it, and just, you know, it'll keep it smaller particles on top of your seeds, and it just better enables it to sprout and come out through the soil. You know, I've used a warming pad in the past, but from my perspective, you got optimal conditions inside. I just don't think that the warming pad is critical enough or adds enough value to use that on my seeds indoors. Now, using my example from previous episodes in this series of our example raised bed garden 4x5 with those plants that we have selected, I'm going to go ahead and go through the whole process of sowing the seeds, which means, you know, you got to make sure you have a clean container. You use a soil block tool to go ahead and make your soil blocks. We go ahead and put the seed in at the right prescribed depth. Use a strainer if need be to cover up the seed, and water them in. And then finally, you want to have a transparent cover over the top to kind of keep that humidity in while that seed is germinating. And so we'll kind of go through that whole process. Alright, so now we're out in the garden. We're going to go ahead and get started sowing some seeds that I'm going to move indoors. First step, I've already cleaned my seed starter tray and the top, the transparent cover. Next, I'm going to go ahead and use my soil block tool. So this is my premium seed starter mix. It's Espoma organic seed starter premium potting mix. And again, everything I try to do, I want it organic, so bought a number of bags of this. And what you got to do is go ahead and mix it in with some water. I went ahead and added water, and we'll want this to be almost like a, not quite mud, but a pretty thick mixture. And the nice thing about this seed starter mix, like I talked about earlier, it's all very fine, or smaller, you know, pieces of everything in here. Humus and vermiculite, and you don't have little pieces of sticks that'll cover up your seed, your sprout from coming through the soil. All right. Alright, so you don't want to push it in and compress it too hard, but I got these ready, so I'm going to go ahead and put me in some right here. Alright, so I'm going to do the same, go through the same process. I usually use a lot bigger container, like my wheelbarrow, but just for the sake of you being able to see good, I'm going to do it this way. Okay, put one down the side right here. Alright, so I got my first tray with all the soil blocks. We'll go ahead and plant some seeds here in a minute. And if you note, the dimple's already made by the soil block. They're already moist, ready to receive a seed for the cherry tomato. And this is maybe a grape or cherry. They're pretty much the same though, but this is a Ukrainian purple tomato. And this is a true black brandywine tomato. Craig's Grande jalapeno. Black Beauty eggplant, Purple Beauty bell pepper, and then Marigold Cupid mix. So before we plant anything, before we sow those seeds, remember we talked about, I'm going to make sure we label these appropriately. Alright, so we got our labels. Now I'm going to actually take these up just so we can see a little bit better. Alright, so what's first? Cupid. So I'll go ahead and plant this bad boy. These marigold seeds are pretty fine. Tell you what, I'm going to put just a little bit of stuff in here. So I'll put like two of the marigolds in each. They pretty much germinate fairly well. What do we got next? We got the Purple Beauty pepper. I'm doing like 2 for each type. In reality, I do like 4 trays, so I actually have a number of extra for just about each of the types. But I don't double the number. You don't have to do that. You just need a couple extra just in case the seeds don't germinate for whatever reason. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's see if it says how deep. 1/4 inch deep, according to the back of this. What's next? So we got, that was that eggplant Black Beauty, pepper, red grande jalapeno, I think what they say is the depth, if you have to estimate, you do about 3 times the, if it's like a 16 inch, like these are really small, you'd only do a 1/4 inch. Alright, let's see here, we got tomato true black brandywine. Finally, the Ukrainian purple. Now again, the germination rate, I mean, you get these seeds from a reputable vendor, but they don't keep seeds super long, or they give it away. It's kind of freebies. When you order 5 pack of seeds, you get an extra one free. So the longer you have them, especially if you leave it out in my shed, let's just say I leave it out in my shed and it's hot during the summer, it's freezing in the in the winter, those seeds are just not going to last that long to germinate. It'll cut how many years they'll last. Because this is a premium seed starting mix, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to sift it. But if you have a sifter and you have some pretty big pieces of stuff in your mix, then it makes sense to go ahead and get a sifter and just kind of shake it. You shake it, it'll drop down on there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring this in, and then we will I'm going to water it down inside, and then I'll put the top on top of it. I forgot about these big old, what I end up doing is turn these on the side so I can put my cover on the top of it. So we'll bring it in. We'll see you in a minute. Alright, so I went ahead and brought the seed starter tray in. I went ahead and laid down the labels. And all I'm going to do is water these in. Just a little spray bottle. Remember, they're already moist from when we put the soil blocks in here. course, you want to do this on an old table so it won't hurt anything. Alright, so that's pretty good. Alright, the next step is we want to go ahead and put our transparent cover on. Cover is from a different kit, but we're not trying to get it to seal, so this will be perfectly fine. You can use plastic wrap or something like saran wrap as well. Poke you a couple holes because again you don't want it perfectly sealed so it doesn't breathe a little bit. Alright, so now I put my grow light up. I'll end up having the grow light on. I'll leave it on for 14 hours a day. It's on a timer, and that's been successful for me. You do not need light for the germination process except on a couple of specific vegetable types. So I'm having this on just kind of keep the tray warm. But make sure, and you don't have to have it on now, but once your sprout comes out of the seed and it reaches that surface, you have to have light for it to grow. And so, like I said, I'll keep it on 14 hours a day on a timer, all through the germination process and all the way until we actually move the seedlings out, either to bump them up into a smaller individual pot or directly out into the raised bed. Alright, so one thing you want to do is, as that sprout comes up out of the soil, the first leaf or two is not going to be its permanent true leaves. But once two of those true leaves come out, then you want to go ahead and apply a organic weak strength fertilizer. I'll go ahead and use Neptune's fish and seaweed fertilizer, organic, and it's organic liquid fertilizer at 1/4 strength. You don't want to go any more than that, or it could affect your plants detrimentally. So it's important that you use it at 1/4 strength and no higher. But you can go ahead and apply that. Take a look at your plants every week. If it looks like it needs a little bit of bump, you can go ahead and apply a little bit more. So every week or maybe every other week, just depending upon how your plants are growing, how they're doing. Alright, now as their seedlings start growing up, you can tell this is a couple inches over the top, but as they come up, now what I got to do, I'm going to have to put another couple timbers underneath here to raise it up to where I need it to be, but you can then adjust. But you want to keep the light, obviously, you want to keep the light bulb actually off the leaves, or off the top of the plants, because it will burn the top of the plants if it touches it. Alright, so I intend to have these in here 6 to 8 weeks. If you can't get them directly out into your raised bed at that point, then you're probably going to need to go ahead and bump those plants up. And what that means is you're going to take that soil block with the plant in it, and you're going to plant it individually in a smaller pot, or individually in a small pot. I use like 4-inch plastic pots, and you don't have to use a seed starter mix at that point. You can go ahead and go with a potting mix. So you would basically move it from the tray here inside into a 4-inch pot. What you want to do is, if you go ahead and move it into a smaller pot, you want to keep it inside, or before you go and just set it outside, you need to make sure you harden it off. And what that means is you spend a little bit of time outside, getting it accustomed to the temperature and the environment outside, and then put it back inside. And just progressively do that over a week or so, and then you can leave it outside, with the one caveat that if it does freeze or frost, you're going to need to bring them in, with tomatoes and peppers and things like that, because that freeze or frost will kill them if we leave them outside. In the first 2 videos of our spring garden series, we planned and laid out our garden, our new organic raised bed backyard garden. In this video, the 3rd video in the series, covers sowing seed indoors, the benefits, and then we actually show you how I go about doing that. Upcoming videos will focus on getting your raised bed ready, direct sowing seeds, and planting those transplants directly into your garden. Alright, thanks for joining me at Louisiana Simple Living today. Hey, it was fun. We got to sow some seeds, and I always get excited about doing that. As mentioned earlier, my goal for 2021 is to get 1,000 of you viewers out there to go ahead and start your first backyard organic raised bed garden. And we're 3 videos into that process. So join me on this journey. I know I'm having fun. I know you're going to have fun as well. If you haven't subscribed as yet, please subscribe, ring the notification bell, and like the video. I don't want you to miss any of this content. So go ahead and do something you hadn't done before. build you a backyard organic raised bed garden. And as always, I will see you on the next video.